What It Takes Radio Company. We are helping you reach your audience, and another edition of Inconvenient Ideas, because everything you think you know, it might be wrong. And here we go with the subject somewhat near and dear to me, but not very nice. How did Minnesota nice give way to the present of Minnesota vice? Just a little bit of reflections, maybe a little bit of a rant about that.
Well, greetings once again. This is Stan. It's the 30th of December, and right now everybody is talking about New Year's coming, and everyone's saying, give me, give me, give me, give me, give me, as we are being inundated with requests for money. And we've just done a little program about that in which we have said, hey, before you give to others, maybe you need to invest in yourself. That might be an inconvenient idea. I know I'm going to get some real feedback from that because people will say, no, you're supposed to give money to us so that we can do good for others. And sometimes I say, well, maybe there's a different way of thinking, because being different is how you will be successful in life, particularly in business. Hey, I want you to think about a couple things. First of all, can you see this book? The camera doesn't like it. It blinks around, but it's called Technopoly, not Monopoly, Technopoly. And it's an old book, but it needs to be reread, particularly. The gentleman's name is Neil Postman, and many years ago he wrote a book called Amusing Ourselves to Death. And it was about our fascination with the media. And I very much used to make my broadcasting people, as I was doing some adjunct college teaching, talk about that. You know, what are we doing? Is when we use the media as an entertainment medium, are we doing something more to our culture than just having a source of entertainment? What if we are so fascinated by the entertainment that we might be amusing ourselves to death? What do you think about that? Certainly an inconvenient idea. And I challenge many broadcasters. Hey, are you doing the right thing when you use that golden microphone, when you use that camera? It's not just about you getting ratings and making money, which is what most people do when they use the media. Maybe you are called to do something bigger, better, and greater. Well, what Neil Postman said in this book, and the man has passed on, is that in effect, and this was a few years ago when he wrote this, but it's even more true now, is that essentially technology has dominated us far more than we even begin to realize in so many ways. And many of those things are not necessarily good for us. And how technology has taken over the practice of medicine, and how technology has taken over the practice of polling and of political formation. I would just encourage you, if you are wanting to be thoughtful about your career, about the technology that you're using, and about using, which you're going to have to. You're going to have to learn how to use the media. But don't let it use you. And it will if you let it. Inconvenient idea. The other thing I just simply wanted to bring up was another inconvenient idea. And I usually don't want to get terribly involved in any political situations. But this is a money situation and maybe an ethos situation. I spent a good deal of my career in Minnesota. I went to college in Minnesota. I'm a graduate, a proud graduate of the Golden Gopher, University of Minnesota. Married a woman from Minnesota and did a lot of my school teaching in Minnesota. And that was a part of my life. Now we've gone from Minnesota to Arizona, and now we're in Carolina. And there's always a reason for that move. We've been moved many times. As one of my mentors said, Stan, if you want to be successful, you can't stay in one place. If you want to be successful, you have to be ready to be on the move. And that may mean that you make movements not only in your career, but in your positioning, in your job, in your company, and in your very location. Mobility matters. Think about that. Just think about that. Another inconvenient idea. Yes, stability, staying in the place and living a long-term career in one place, with one space, with one position. A lot of good things about that, but could it be also an inconvenient idea? But here's the point. It's not politics. Minnesota, what happened? Why did Minnesota nice turn into Minnesota vice? And this is not because I want to be involved in what would be the racial element, but involved in the fact or the political element. It's the money element. What happened? Now, what happened, as many of you are discovering, is that the big fraud was primarily put on by those who are members of the Somali community in Minnesota. Now, how did that happen and what happened? Well, obviously, something happened in Somalia. And the film Black Hawk Down was a story about how that happened as we were trying to rescue people in Mogadishu, which was one of the capitals of Somalia. Here is an inconvenient truth. Somalia was a bad place, run by bad people. It had bad theologies, bad theories, and a bad culture. I'm sorry, but it did. And of course, thousands of people just got up and left as best they could. And thousands came to Minnesota. And there were things that right off the bat, and I was living through this, I said, something needs to be done to make sure that the values that these people have are confronted if they do not match the values of our American, Western, primarily Christian Jewish culture. Otherwise, you get all kinds of other divisions. Now, this idea of multiculturalism, that was always overrated. There has to be, both in a country and in a community and in a business, a strong cultural uniformity in many ways. All kinds of ethnic differences, certainly religious and political differences, but there has to be a consolidating culture that is formulated and sometimes almost enforced. One of the things that happened, which right off the bat bothered, is that a number of the Somali people were able to get jobs as taxi drivers. Great! Wonderful! Unfortunately, there was a problem. All of a sudden, the taxi drivers who were Somalia said that they were not going to pick up anybody at the airport who had liquor with them. They at the they came back and they got it from the shops, particularly the free trade shops, and somebody was carrying something they'd gotten in Europe or other place, and they had liquor. The taxi driver said, "We don't do that. We're Muslim, and we don't allow people in our taxi who have liquor with them." Now, you don't do that. You're paid to run a taxi. Well, we don't know if we're. And instead of actually coming down and stomping on it and said, "That's none of your business. You don't get to do that." Well, eventually they hemmed and hawed as to, oh my goodness. Now, what was obviously very, very necessary was the fact that the difference and the problems that the people had who brought with them, the assimilation was not done. And that's why, in many cases, it has persisted to this day. And again, the proverbial, oh, we want to be Minnesota nice. And what happened is now we have a culture which has dominated the politics, where they pointed out that the community is so solidly assimilated, not that they have become a significant voting bloc. And because Minnesota Nice said anybody can get to vote and there is no voter checking or registration, as a result, a good deal of the political landscape in Minnesota is now dominated by one particular bloc that has ethnic power. That's just what happened. And now 9, 10, 11 billion dollars is gone because of what happened. And in terms of the economic situation, we know about the Minnesota riots after take place after the killing of the man. In fact, I don't want to use the name because that's not what it should be about. But that also contributed to the fact that right now, many of us who are from Minnesota, we have no desire to ever go back because we see that the culture, and as some people have said, it's just not the Minnesota I grew up with in many, many ways and places. It happens. And I just simply point out that we have to remember that traditions and culture that have helped people to put frameworks about what can be done, what should be done, how people should behave, those happen to be some very important things that need preservation and protection. When I was teaching school in Minnesota, I was actually one of the teachers in probably one of the best school districts in Minnesota. The educational quality in the public schools of Minnesota has deteriorated in a very negative way. And there are parts of Minneapolis that I not necessarily would want to go to anymore, even though I lived there and prospered there and loved it there. It's sad. What do? Well, here's what we learned. And this is an inconvenient idea. Years ago, when I first gained my energy and some of my knowledge about how to do organizational and performance coaching, one of the key things was that culture eats everything. It'll eat strategy, it'll eat motivation. And so the preservation of culture that is positive in an organization and a community is very strong. And if it goes bad, a guy named Edgar Schein just simply said, You walk into a bad culture, politically, economically, socially, relationship, 4 levels deep. Bang. You don't just remove a few, you remove 4 levels. Now, that was a very controversial idea and still is. It's an inconvenient idea, is the proverbial you clean house. You fire them all. Not because they individually were bad. It's because the culture went bad. And because of that, new things, new people, new virtues, and new, vehicles and new ways are necessary to replace the old vices that have emerged. That's a little bit of how an old man thinks, but has looked at the way the world works. But I would just remind you that, in effect, culture matters. And that once you lose it, the traditions, and this is a lot about what Postman was saying, is that technology replaces traditional cultures in so many ways that it could be very, very harmful and very, very dangerous. That once you have a technopoly, it has no morals, no ethics, no standards except one: efficiency, effectiveness, power. That's all it has. And that's all you'll get. You will not get morality or kindness or goodness or graciousness or any of that stuff when you are truly, fully technocracy. I'm done. Thank you for your time. I can help you because I'm old and have a lot of experience both in broadcasting and in marketing and in media. And you all could use some old men with inconvenient ideas from time to time, just to be a reminder of this is the way the world works. This is the way it makes sense. This is what you're going to have to do if you want to have things go well for you and for those you love and care for. Politically, economically, relationally, socially, remember that. Otherwise, nice can go to vice quite quick. Bye for now. Thank you.